first of all, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry this has to be a session restricted to delegates, but that's the size of the hall and there's not much we could do. Though as you can see, there are still people queuing up to get in. I thought we would do this by talking a bit about Thida's book. We talk about the idea of prisoners of conscience. Some of you may have read her book. Those who haven't, she's going to read a few passages, I hope, and we will talk a bit about it. And then we'll throw it open to the audience, and you can ask as many questions as you like. While they're sort of filing in, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? Because as far as I know, you started out as a doctor. You had a perfectly clear and happy life ahead of you. You were a successful doctor. You could have done well. And then you decided that you were going to put your life as a doctor on hold, and you were going to spend your time fighting for your country. Tell us a bit about that decision.
Well, I have been brought up in an ordinary family, but I think my father was like a perfect model of the good citizens for me, and I ever wonder how I can be a better citizen. My most privileged dream is to become a better citizen for my country. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. So I ever think I should do something. I ever feel that I can change my life, as you said. At that time, you know, I was about to sit an exam from UK, and I can change my life by having more advanced degrees and so. But what I'm interested in is not changing myself. I really want to change my country because of my very little knowledge. I know my country is not in the direction in these early 80s. So I really want to change, do something for my country. So that's put me in this very long walk, and I think I still cannot give up my struggle since my country is not yet to the destination.
Let's talk. I'm not sure everyone here knows what Burma was like or Myanmar was like when you started out. Tell us a bit about the situation. What were you protesting against?
Well, you know, after independence, that was pretty round about 10 years of the parliamentary democracy. And then in 1962, the very first military coup, but that government turned out to be the socialist government from 1962 until 1988. You know, at that time, there was very heavy censorship and very effective propaganda machine, and the education system was pretty bad. So a lot of people in Burma, we really don't know what we don't know. We really don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. But what we do know is we are in so much poverty. And we really desperate of having this one-party system since 1962. Because of this new socialist government in 1974, it's changed our constitution. And because of this constitution, there was only one political party system. So we didn't know much about the rest of the world, but what we do know is we were in pretty bad condition. Then in 1988, we started our big demonstration, big protests to fight for democracy. That was the beginning of another era of military junta. You know, the fight was pretty brief. In September 1988, another military junta took the power, and it put us more desperate condition, total authoritarian regime for another more than 20 years. So that was the condition of Burma.
I don't know, how many people in this audience have been to Burma? Okay, so the vast majority haven't. I've only been once, and I went just as it was opening up. And the one thing that struck me, as you say, was that not only was it military regime after military regime, when there was a coup, it was one set of military guys getting rid of the other set of military guys. Also that Burma had closed itself up from the rest of the world. It sort of existed almost in isolation. There was very little contact with the rest of the world. Is that fair?
Well, you know, we were under British colony since 1824 for the southern part. Since 1885, the whole country was under British colony. So we got independence in 1948. So throughout our history, we never ever enjoy the true freedom whatsoever. Yeah. So we pretty much isolated.
So now let's talk about you. At what stage did you decide that you were going to put your life on hold? You were going to become somebody who fought for her country, and how did that decision come about?
Not that kind of decision I made. I think I read a lot, and I really being inspired by so many personal memoir, autobiography, so and so. So I always having in mind, one day I really wonder, I wrote my own prison memoir. So that's why when in 1993, when I was arrested and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the first response is, I was a little bit happy. You know, now I got my chance to write my own prison memoir, something like that. Yeah, a little bit happy, sure.
20 years in jail?
Yep.
All
but
right.
Not for the duration, you know. Yeah. Going to have a prison experience was what I was looking for in the past.
When you were arrested and sentenced, was there anything like a free trial, or was it like a done deal?
It's a martial code. So, yeah, there was no proper code, and the judge was asked to read the decision. So it was not a proper process of the trial. It was pretty bad, but during the detention period, I could successfully smuggle out a letter to my parents saying that on which date the trial will be started. So could you please bring a lawyer for me? So I was the only one who can have my own lawyer, but it was not useful, you know, because the martial code, the trial, it's pretty much authoritarian.
So did you know when the trial began that you were going to be convicted? I mean, was that pretty much a given?
No, this is the, I just keeping informed my parents to find out what date really. So it was so much attempts to smuggle out some letters during the detention period. Yeah.
When you were sentenced to 20 years, other than saying, which I'm sure was part of it, I can now read and write, what else did you feel?
We were not allowed to read nor read.
Nothing?
Nothing.
So how did you feel being told that you, in the prime of your life, a doctor, now would spend 20 years in a prison?
Well, that's, I think, reading myself, becoming my survival secrets. Practice Vipassana meditation. It's a Theravada Buddhism's practice, and it's all about reading myself, reading the body and the mind. And it's really helped me to be liberated, not just from kind of the physical walls, but from the samsara. So that's, I was terribly ill indeed, you know. Everybody thought I might die in prison. And when I got pulmonary tuberculosis, my body weight was only 80 pounds. I got 6 months consecutive fever, so and so. So everybody thought I might die in prison. But because of this kind of the practice and the mindfulness, I might say I was in peace.
That's very interesting. You're in what sounds from all accounts like a pretty Spartan prison. You have fever for 6 months.
Yeah.
You have pretty serious case of TB. You're considered to be on the death list, and yet you say you were at peace. Explain that.
Well, for me, I used to say freedom is from within. Freedom is not given rights. It's a conscience choice. So I ever choose the way to live with freedom. Even though I were in prison and I always thinking, okay, you know, as persons, who was sentenced to 20 years, so I might be released after 20 years, but this is also not granted. Because some of my friends who were sentenced to 7 years, so and so, but even just before they were released, they were charged for another sentences. So we cannot have any granted hope to be released whatsoever during these military junta days. So what's the guarantee? And I was always looking, raising questions for myself. What else can you do? I always just thinking I'm the one who can rely on. I'm not thinking the other people can give me freedom or other people can help me to think and act freely. So that's why I always thinking, okay, what I can do in this situation, and I'm finding this Vipassana meditations to liberate myself from the samsara. It goes beyond to be released from the prisons because, you know, as I said, the Burma itself is like a very, very big prison, you know. So for that reason, I make sure I cannot be free even though I will be released from prison, even if my country has not yet changed. For that reason, what I'm looking for is having the freedom inside myself, having the freedom from within myself is most important for my life. For that reason, I think I always try to be at peace with my own strength, not begging from anyone else.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that you were in prison. You had this sense that even if you were going to be released, the whole country was a prison anyhow. You were exchanging one kind of prison for another kind of prison. It was better to find freedom within rather than to live in or react to these prisons outside. I accept that, and that's obviously something all of us will admire. But there must have been moments of despair. There were no moments of desperation, despair, depression?
Well, of course, you know, especially when I got sick, you know, when I contracted pulmonary tuberculosis. On top of that, I already having my endometriosis. This is such a painful condition. And when I got very high fever, and I also have very painful, so much deeply rooted pain because of this endometriosis. So this kind of illness make me sometimes got depressed, and I ever think, you know, I should do something, even though in this very desperate situation, I can still be able to do something else. So because of this illness, I cannot make myself being able to do different from my routine. Most of the prisoners' routine is just waiting for time to go out of the cell for 30 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, for having a bath and walking around. That's normally, but for me, I expected beyond, you know. So that's why I tried to smuggle in some books through one of my friend's inmates. So because of her, I can mostly, you know, I was recognized as a very stubborn, bad prisoner. And none of the prison guards want to cooperate or help me anything else. So I need someone else to smuggle in these books, and we use nicknames, vitamins for books. So then she smuggled in some books, and I shared through the secret way to smuggle in the books into my cell, and at night I need to read. I really don't want to lose what's going on, lose the information of what's going on in the war. That's why I try to read inside the prison. If I cannot get these vitamins, I read myself. This is the mindfulness meditation. And then that make me in peace, I might say. Yeah.
You talk about Vipassana and finding peace within yourself, but in real terms, just explain to us, how would you do it? How would you meditate?
Well, meditation, it's hard to explain in 5 minutes, of course.
You can
it's
take
awareness.
We have time, you can take longer. Go ahead.
It's awareness, you know. So the real practice, the practical term for practicing the Vipassana meditation is the awareness of what's happening in the body and the mind in order to learn about impermanence, suffering, and there is no self. So that's three is the basic principles for practice, the Vipassana meditation practitioner. So that's also not easy, but what we do need is the sort of effort. It needs to be concentrated all the time. It's not just like doing sports for certain amount of time. So it keeps me the whole day indeed, 24 hours. So up to 20 hours per day I meditated. Keep my mindfulness and awareness very focused and concentrated. With that concentration and awareness, it gives me strength and peace.
Is there anything you've written from that period that you'd like to read?
Well, maybe I'm thinking of reading some lines not directly related to the meditation, but it's about freedom. And you know, I was 6 months consecutive fever and pulmonary tuberculosis. At that time, I got painful and the irregular bleeding. So when the prison guards noticed, I thought to be pretty bad. Then they sent to the hospital outside the prisons. That was the, and then, you know, at that time, the prison medical officer, she is the wife of the military officer, high-rank military officer. So she wants to be bribed, and I denied. And she gives me so much headache, and then she never cooperates me. So only after less than 12 hours in the hospital, without having any treatment yet, I was asked to be discharged. So I was sent back to the prisons without having any treatment. And then as soon as I was back to the prison, the medical staff asked me to give up all the medicines what I have in my cells. So this the stories behind, beyond this. Back in the prison, the other friends in the other cells could not believe their eyes when they saw me. Looking deathly sick but angry, back in prison less than 24 hours after saying goodbye. I took a much-needed rest after putting away my things. I had no strength left to explain. Before I could fully regain my breath, a nurse came to tell me that I had to keep all my medicines in the prison clinic. They will not accept my refusal. Then the matron came over and told me that this order came straight from the woman's doctor in charge. She also told me that they would bring me the medicines whenever I needed to take it. I could not accept this. My parents bought these medicines for me, and I often share them with others in my blog. I could not accept that I must put all my medicines in their hands because they had not even given me any effective treatment. Then I just want to skip 2 paragraphs. I immediately tried to do Vipassana meditation, which I had not have been doing regularly for some time. The main thing was that I wanted to prepare myself, as I knew I must not face them again with this boiling rage. I needed to be calm and try to be by focusing on the feeling of touch at the tip of my nostril as I breathe in and out. Vipassana had often rescued me from situations like this. Just as I expected, within 15 minutes, I heard the sound of line up. I sat up on the bench. The iron door of our block swung open, and a few uniformed men walked determinedly towards me. Some wore stunned looks, as if stalking prey, and some wore friendly glows, as if to manipulate me. There were many stars on their epaulets. It looked as if all the high-ranking officers of the prisons were coming to confront me. Among them, I saw the head of the prison hospital, but I did not see the woman's doctor in charge. "What do you want?" asked the chief warden. I bluntly answered, 1, I can't allow my medicines to be taken away. 2, I won't take any treatment from the woman's doctor in charge and would like my case to be handled by another doctor. Then they told me that the same thing. This was the result of me saying that whatever happened to me was on them. It's nonsense. I was at the hospital but got no treatment whatsoever. It's an order from above. We can't do anything. Then what is this about taking my medicines away? My voice was still harsh despite the fact that I was trying to control my anger. I pulled all my attention again to the tip of my nostrils to concentrate on my breath and tried harder to calm myself. That's because you might use these medicines to kill yourself. You could do it too because you understand everything about medication, said Deputy Chief Warden in a gentle tone. Good, I thought. I have finally found someone I can talk to in a civilized manner. Oh gosh, no uncle. I deliberately addressed him as uncle as I wanted to get on informal terms with him. I wanted our interaction to be friendly and thus gain his empathy. If I wanted to die, even if you left me, naked in my cell, I could still keep hitting my head against the wall to kill myself. My problem here is to stay alive and well, not to kill myself. I don't want to die. Having had no effective treatment for my illness, I'm asking for these 2 things in order to live, uncle. My voice became calmer. So I'm going to skip, and I just want to read the end of the program. So we just talking about, at that time I already declared my hunger strike, but finally they agreed what I demanded. And then here is his reply, here is my response. Uncle, I would like to get a second opinion from another doctor who won't say I'm going to die in 6 months. Let's do it this way. I turned to the head of the prison hospital and continue. You be the one to continue checking my condition. If so, I will accept it. Let me say, Thida, you the one who's free. The Deputy Chief Warden uttered these words with his eyes lowered and sighed softly. Thida, you the one who's free. Those words echo in my ears. Although I knew what he meant, I asked anyway, what do you mean, uncle? Are you saying I, locked up behind these doors in 12 by 12 foot cells for 23 hours, 15 minutes a day, am the one who's free? You can say what you think, but we are civil servants. Please understand us. His voice faded as he spoke. The others were so quiet, one could have heard a pin drop. So this is the piece about the freedom and peace.
I think many people here will want to know a little bit about the struggle as well. Apparently, you were very inspired by Aung San Suu Kyi initially. Tell us a little bit about why you admired her so much.
Well, indeed, I always having very kind of the conflicting opinion on her. You know, she left the country for so long, and just before the incidents, just before the 88 protests, she went back home, and at that time, I'm not sure I going to walk with her or not. But, you know, during these protests, we ended up having nowhere for the very first week of the protest. But on 26 August 1988, there was a big talk at the Shwedagon Pagoda. That was by her. And that was the very beginning of my interest and inspiration. The way she expressed her interest towards the country and the way she thinks for the future of the country really brings me inspiration. That's what's the very beginning. And then I walked together with her from late September 1988 till July 1989.
What was she like to work with? Because now people have a tendency to say that she was a bit authoritarian. Did you find that?
Well, she has been changed, and during this 88-89 period, she was pretty much open to everybody. And then, you know, at that time, she's really wonder what's going on inside the country that she never ever have as her own experience, first-hand experience. That's why I think these days she was very open, and she was pretty much in love with the community.
People say, and you said this too, that she became eventually a prisoner of applause. She got so much applause around the world. She was hailed as a heroine. She got awards. Movies were made about her. And perhaps this changed her. Do you accept that?
Well, you know, I think since 1995, the very first time she was released from very first house arrest, her status has changed. The response from the war make her change, and the people surrounding her make her change since 1995, I think. So after times, I think the spending too much time under house arrest also make her change.
Change in what way?
As we see today, and it's hard to describe, I think she's also having a very difficult position to put herself into her emergent model, I think.
Explain that.
You know, she might have something she imagined how she should be look like, but right now she's finding ways to do so. For me, it sounds like, you know, once I wrote a novel, and I used the term "the prisoners of applause." She was someone like the prisoner of applause. Now she's also having so much expectation and hope from her own community, not just from her own community, but from the international community. And then, you know, the limitations, restrictions, not only from the army, but also from her own people herself. So many restrictions is surrounding her right now. That's why I think she might have some difficulties to put herself in her emergent steps, something like that. It's still struggling, I think.
Are you surprised by the way in which she's responded to the Rohingya crisis?
Well, yeah, we not just in this crisis, I think. There are so many other things is going on. Recently, a group of students who make a strike at the Mandalay University, and they were dismissed from the university. So we were pretty much amazed how the student strikes has been taken care by currently, something like that. So there are so many other crises that's going on, and the response from the government, the response from her party is pretty much very different from what we expected.
And the Rohingyas?
Oh, sure, yeah.
What about that? How do you think she should have handled it?
Well, it was the response, even for the diplomatic briefing by her, was pretty late, and we really want to know how she looks at the crisis, the nature of the crisis, the nature of the conflict, and the principles towards the solution. It's nothing. We cannot find any the principle for handling this crisis. It is nowhere for us. We really don't know how she tackles.
But you have a situation where there are pretty well documented reports of the army committing excesses on the Rohingyas, mass rape of Muslim women, murders, etc. And yet, from Aung San Suu Kyi, all we've had really is silence.
Well, you know, the problem is, I think we having suffered the syndrome or lack of information all the time because of the censorship and the propaganda machine. So a lot of the domestic information, the information about what's going on inside the country, especially about the Rakhine State, is handling by the army news agency, the army news. So people were told totally too much extremely different contradicting information. So a lot of people really cannot decide what's really going on. And for her, I don't know, I really don't know how much reliable information she's having right now. So maybe she's also suffering the lack of information, that's why she skipped.
Well, presumably she has access to the BBC, to CNN. This is not stuff that she has to get inside information for. We all see the horrors, we all see the refugees. I mean, how difficult is it for this woman to find out what's really happening?
But I think the problem is whether she believes these kind of information or not. You know, there are so many impression through the President Office and State's Consular Office. They keep rejecting these kinds of informations. They keep rejecting. So it's in doubt, you know. For me, what I'm thinking is, are they accepting these as the reliable information or not? That's also, you know, the syndrome of lack of information, making people distrust.
But let's assume, for the purpose of argument, that Aung San Suu Kyi does have a television set and a satellite dish, and she's concerned about the reports that she sees daily. If she confronted her friends, now her new friends in the army, couldn't something happen? If she made a few statements, if she told the people of Burma what was being done in her name, wouldn't things change?
Well, yeah, but I cannot say on behalf of her, obviously. So that's what all we wonder, you know. We all really waiting hard to say something concrete on the policy. How do we look at the issue? How do we solve? And how do we proceed? That's what we really not being well informed yet.
As somebody who idolized her at one stage, are you disillusioned now?
Well, it's pretty much complicated issue, you know. The whole...
You can give me a complicated answer.
Well, the whole... the history, it's the army, you know. The problem is army handling all the informations, TV channels, radio channels, and the print channel. And then after the USDP, the political party backed up by the army, had failed in the 2015 election, there was a rumor saying that they cannot allow the new civilian government to hold the power not more than 2 years, something like that. So they used several other ways, and since the military dictatorships keep its power, by making the whole society either in fear or in sense of insecurity. So to keep its role as a leading political role, army needs insecurity inside the country. So there are so many very tiny but meaningful examples of handling and maneuvering some kind of the crisis. I think that's why we need to be very careful of interpreting the conflict. And for me, the crisis in this area is more or less politics, not simply as religious nor the racial. It's purely a political conflict.
No, I accept that there's politics, but at the end of the day, when people's villages are burnt, their daughters are raped, and they are murdered, it goes beyond politics, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah, that's why we really do want to have a strong information how to proceed with, and the detailed procedure of how to go through. Yeah, we truly need the more positive and humanly response towards everybody, not just this particular population. You know, at the same time, 2 days ago, there was a air strikes to the Kachin State's people. Yeah. So civilians people and peoples in the internally displaced refugees camps, they are in despair too. Yeah. So their cases is also not being selected by the international community. So they just wonder to whom we should rely on. Nobody cares us. Nor our government, nor our army, nor the international community. So there are so many things going on, and we truly want to have more concrete answer towards this, not just from the government, but also from the army.
But you do see the conflict. I think most people in this room, most right-thinking people all over the world, supported the struggle of the Burmese people. We regarded Aung San Suu Kyi as a modern heroine. We thought that she would give freedom and democracy to Burma. And what we see now is some measure of freedom, but essentially a deal with the generals and huge measures of brutality. And we begin to wonder, were we wrong? Were we conned by her?
Well, maybe what we were wrong is just choose someone as the wholly and only responsible person for our community. I think the majority of our population, our community has been being neglected, even though a lot of the unidentified, anonymous heroes, there were so many people, but nobody knows, especially the international community never ever knows them. And the role of these kind of the anonymous freedom fighters are being underestimated throughout the history. So that's why there is not much space for them to proceed right now, I think. That's one side. And then I think the tricky part is, you know, I used to say the current situation is worse than the coup. During the military junta, everybody knows what is the common enemy. But right now, the common enemy has wearing so many hats. 25% representative in the legislation, all National Assembly and all the regional parliaments. And then under the direct control of the Commander-in-Chief, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Ministry of Borders Affairs. Under Ministry of Home Affairs, all the general administrative departments, police forces, so and so. So the setup of this 2008 Constitution itself is pretty tricky. And I cannot say we having a civilian government. I cannot see. The cabinet having some civilians, but the most of the authority regarding to the security issue and the rule of law is under the hands of army, especially commander-in-chief.
I'm going to throw this open. Before that, just a last question. You suffered many years in jail. You nearly died in jail. You suffered deprivations that I can't even imagine to create a new Burma, a just Burma. Are you happy with the Burma you've created?
Well, to be frank, I used to say, I always say I never ever give up my citizenship. I do love my country. I really want to change my country. I never regret. I was offered to leave the country and having another citizenship, so and so. I always say no. But you might notice on 29 January last year, a lawyer was killed at the airport. He was shot to death, and he's a Muslim, and he's the one who supports Aung San Suu Kyi, the analyst, the consultant lawyer. So as soon as I noticed about this killing, that was the very first time I have having a doubt. Should I still live in Burma? Am I right? Something like that. I need to confess this. So I'm really sorry of what we have lost during this, the 2010 to 2015, the very first government, quasi-civilian government, according to the 2008 constitution. These 5 years make our society lost our long-lasting social harmony. That was the most tragic thing, whatever I have.
All right. Questions? Can I ask the lady in the first row? We give you a microphone, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Savina. I would like to know whether, and perhaps this is a question to you on the right side, the facilitator of this session, and thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. The question is, do you see any similarities in the trends that we are seeing over the border in Myanmar and what we're seeing in India and in other places where tolerance is in fact deteriorating and we are seeing greater tensions between communities? What do you see as happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my 2 bits for what it's worth. Yes, I think we are moving into an intolerant, sectarian era where there is much more majoritarianism all over Southeast Asia, not just in Burma, in India as well. Fortunately, I don't think we've seen the kind of violence against minorities that we see in Burma, in India. But there is violence against Dalits. There is a sense of stigmatizing of minorities in India, which is, for me at least, deeply worrying. Would you like to add?
Well, yeah, I have wrote that article, A Fierce Fear, you know. The fear is deeply rooted in our society. If the society deeply rooted in fear, it's become very fierce. You know, people don't dare to face the one who make oppression. So instead of doing so, people try to bully the weaker one who cannot retaliate back. This is the logic of the fear, I think.
Somebody else a question? The gentleman there.
Thank you. Thida, since the last few months, 2 journalists from Reuters have been detained and brought to trial on the Official Secrets Act. Can you say a little bit about the state of journalism in Myanmar? Because, of course, since 2011, this was one of the more positive things that had happened with the transition to democracy. Can you say a little bit about the media landscape in Myanmar? Thank you.
Well, we don't have any independent private news agency or the media whatsoever for more than 48 years. You know, we were having only the state's own propaganda media throughout the consecutive military regimes, military juntas. So only by late 2000s, we started having the private media, not independent yet, because the censorship has gone only at the end of the 2012. So you could imagine how immature our private independent news media it is. And then most of the time, there was no journalism school whatsoever until 8 years ago. So a lot of the reporters just rely, they have been training by doing something like that. So, and then what we do have is the activist media. A lot of the radio media, it's what's in exile, mostly run by the activists. So people cannot differentiate between the propaganda and journalism, or the journalism and the activism. So that's why, even though there is no more censorship for the media, there are a lot of the kind of peer censorship or the self-censorships is going on. Or because of very immaturity, a lot of reporters cannot handle the things pretty well. At the same time, the media consumerism, you know, the people, since they cannot differentiate between censorship and the editing, something like that. So people always thinking media as the series of military hunters shape they are thinking, people truly believe media is a weapon, something like that. So from the different point of view, our journalism situation is not in the very good direction.
There's a gentleman there, yeah.
Do you think the Panalong agreement with the Kachins and the Karens and the other tribes be implemented in the near future? Or?
Well, Karen, they are cooperating with the current 21st century Panalong peace process, but for Kachin, it's still pretty, so far, you know, the not just Kachin and the other 4 ethnic armed forces has never been recognized by the army to put into the Panalong conference. So the problem is, you know, we truly need having a peace agreement rather than just the ceasefire agreement. So it's been pretty hard. But we have so many problems, so that's why we do need to solve all the problems, not just focus on one particular group of problems.
I think we've time for one more question. The gentleman there at the back.
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
What do you make of the recent agreement to accept and repatriate the Rohingyas that fled for the last 2 years? We know that they don't seem to be really welcome where they come from. Obviously, they were chased a couple of months ago. So do you think there is a little change in the administration, especially in the army who control the Rakhine state? And do you think there's any chance for them to have any kind of safety where they go? Or is just a political decision that they might take out of the pressure from the international community? Thank you.
Well, yeah, it sounds pretty complicated, you know. The interest on this border is not just ours right now. You know, the China's investment, and then as I said, the insecurity it's needed for the army to control its power, you know. So somewhere in the country it should be live in sense of insecurity, something like that. So, and then on the other side, there are so much maneuvering by some political groups to this community for repatriation. Recently, at the refugee camps in Bangladesh, some of the people of their own who convinced the others to go to return back, but they were killed, something like that. So many stakeholders involved in this insecurity. So it is impossible to solve this problem from one side, I think.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so very much for coming. A big hand for Thida.